Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us in from. I am Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this week's Data Center Sales and Marketing and Go-to-Market Q&A live stream, the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. This is sponsored by DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. This series tackles the most pressing challenges that are faced by go-to-market sales and marketing professionals in and around the data center industry. This includes data center operators like those in co-location, wholesale, hyperscale, modular, or edge. It includes technology companies that sell to or partner with data center operators and enterprise data centers. It includes facilities companies that sell to or partner with data center operators or enterprise data centers, as well as real estate and construction in and around the data center industry, and sales and marketing companies in and around the data center industry. This week, we're going to be looking at a handful of insightful questions, sales and marketing challenges that have been raised by you, your peers in the data center industry. This includes how to improve data center and digital infrastructure demand generation. We're also going to look at how to generate net new data center leads and sales opportunities. Then we'll turn our attention to finding prospects for sustainable digital infrastructure and carbon neutral technology. We'll take a quick break for a message from our sponsor, and when we return, we will come back and look at how to build sales and marketing for data center storage, protection, and management. We'll also dive into how to scale up data center sales and marketing. What are some of the most important issues when it comes to developing a scalable, repeatable process? And then we'll head down the home stretch this week by looking at how to save time when marketing and selling data center lifecycle services. So without any further delay, let's jump into this week's first question. So first up, how can we improve data center and digital infrastructure demand generation? Well, first up, we need to be crystal clear on what it is that our company does for providing digital infrastructure services and data center related services. We need to understand what business we're actually in, what job to be done our company actually does. In case you've never heard of that phrase before, job to be done is a concept that was popularized by Harvard Business School, the late Clayton Christensen, who was a professor at Harvard Business School. He wrote a best-selling book about 10, 15 years ago now called The Innovator's Dilemma. And the basic idea is that so many companies, and Was he thinking about technology companies when he wrote this? To a certain degree, if you think about the proximity to Harvard, Cambridge, all that stuff in the greater Boston area. But there's great examples I heard him give over the years talking about how McDonald's didn't know necessarily what business they were in when they were trying to figure out how to get sales of their milkshakes to grow during morning rush hour. So they did all kinds of studies. So at the end of the day, it's super important that you understand why your clients hire your company for certain products and services. And consequently, when they hire your company, what products or services they're essentially firing or choosing not to move forward with. When you understand that, it becomes a lot easier to build your entire demand generation strategy around that for digital infrastructure, for data center, whatever business model you actually call yourself. And in a lot of cases, you may call it something slightly different than your direct competitors and indirect competitors and your prospects and customers. But positioning, carving out your stake within the niche and how you do that is going to be tremendously important to how you define demand generation. So once we know the business we're in, once we have a good idea of how our best clients describe our business, how do we know that? Because we've interviewed them, right? We've done the case studies, we've put them on the website, we've done the video interviews, and we've gotten in their own words what the biggest problem was that they came to our companies for, what caused them to prioritize this initiative, how they weighed the pros and cons of different options that were in front of them. Once we do that, we can define our ideal client profile, or ICP. Our ideal client profile basically documents a simple one-pager of who we want to sell to, who we think we're going to do best with, where we're going to have not only the smoothest sales process, but the best onboarding, the best retention, the easiest path for our clients to get to initial value, intended value, and extended value, for our path to get to basically getting rid of any kind of retention risks and getting to lucrative expansion revenue, either multiple locations, multiple divisions as they grow. But at the end of the day, it's about understanding the value that we provide to clients. And once you do that, it becomes far easier to narrow down in the entire world, where the clients are located. Is it a specific continent? Is it specific countries? Is it a region within a certain country? Is it a certain company size? Do they need to have a certain amount of locations, a certain amount of employee headcount, a certain amount of revenue or turnover? And are there certain industries, business models that we tend to do better at than others? Maybe we're really good with e-commerce and analytics companies, but we're terrible with other kinds of industries. So it's super important to define that at the company level. And then once you've defined that at the company level, then you can set about figuring out who is the most important stakeholder that you need to build a relationship with at that company. Who is the second most important stakeholder that you need to build a relationship with at the company? Once you know the roles, ROLES, not pastry rolls, not bakery rolls, the job functions of who you need to build the relationships with, then it becomes far easier to build buyer personas and prioritize those buyer personas. A buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of an ideal stakeholder at an ideal client that you need to educate and build trust with over time. And in the digital self-propelled buyer's journey that so much of us have to contend with, if we're in and around digital infrastructure and data centers, it's so important that we show up in the awareness and the consideration stages, the early and middle stages of their buyer's journey, their research and decision-making process. Because by default, when I look at most companies in digital infrastructure in the data center space, even with where we are today, they're like barely phoning it in the first early and middle stages of the journey. Gartner came out with some research a little while back that found that 83% of the buyer's journey is now over before you meet a prospect. What does that mean? That if you're not thinking about how you're going to show up early as a teacher, as a trusted advisor, as a subject matter expert, as a thought leader, if you're not thinking about a way to build a relationship with your prospects and customers early like that, you're basically not going to be present for the first 83% of their decision-making process, which is a really crappy place to be. Because if they find you at all for the last 17%, the only thing that's going to cause them to change course is doing it cheaper, race to the bottom, which none of us want to do, right? So in order to show up in the first 83%, we need to understand what business we're in, why they choose us, and then once we know at a company level who we're looking for, and at a job function level who we're looking for within those companies. Then we need consensus around what they're working on, their biggest goals in their professionally, and what's frustrating them the most, their biggest challenges. Once we have the consensus on that, it becomes far easier to show up as the teacher, as the consultant, as a subject matter expert, and educate and build trust with scale. That's how you go about building demand generation for data center and digital infrastructure. Super cognizant of the journey they go through, super cognizant of the kind of company they come from and what they're doing in their day-to-day job, and how you can meet them where they actually are. Not where you want them to be, but where they actually are, in a way that puts deposits into the relationship bank account. So you're training them to know that you are the one who's going to be the teacher. You are the one that's teaching them how to evaluate all the other alternatives. So you're almost certain, when you do this right, to be on the short list. And in some situations, you may do it so well that your company actually is the short list. In other words, you've neutralized all the competition. So food for thought on what to be thinking about when it comes to demand generation for data center and digital infrastructure. Next question for today is how to generate net new data center leads and sales opportunities. How to generate net new data center leads and sales opportunities. So it's interesting that this particular viewer, this particular reader, dropped in the words net new. What that leads me to believe is this particular person doesn't value a lead showing up a second or third or fourth time. And that's a problem. I'll tell you why that's a problem. All of the research today on enterprise and mid-market B2B buyers, especially technology buyers, points to a self-propelled buyer's journey. This means most of the people that you sell to are beyond allergic to spending time with your sales team until they absolutely positively have to. Totally averse to early and middle stage sales contact. They will stand on their nose to read articles, watch podcasts, attend webinars, go to review websites, ask questions on social. They will do everything possible to avoid human contact, especially with your sales team, until they are just about ready to buy. In the same general context, most of the large industry research firms have found that there are literally dozens, specifically 28 touch points, 28, just a little bit under 30, about 28 touch points in between when someone is a complete stranger just starting to research a goal that they're trying to achieve or challenge they're trying to overcome, and when they actually purchase. What that means is if your company, like many in the data center industry, is in love with event marketing and field marketing, you can have the most epic cabana party poolside in Las Vegas. You can have the most amazing celebrity golf tournament on one of the most gorgeous courses on the planet. But the problem is that's just one or maybe two touch points. What are you going to do the other 364 days of the year when you don't have proximity with that person? That's one or two touch points out of 28. What are your other 26 touch points? What are your other 27 touch point attempts going to look like so you are around that person when they're going to continue to do their research and comparing options and evaluating pricing? If you're staring back at the screen like deer in headlights and saying, gee, that's a great question, I don't know. Well, self-awareness is the first step to getting on the right path to fixing this. But net new is really dangerous, because the reality is, for us to be successful with generating leads and nurturing those leads and continuing to educate and build trust and advancing those leads into sales opportunities, they're going to be net new once. They're going to be nurtured 24, 25, 26, 7 times by different parties in and around the data center industry. The question is, how many of those touch points beyond the initial net new is your company going to be in on? Or are you going to bury your head in the sand and pretend like, oh, everyone's buying today? BS. Everyone's buying today is about as likely as you going out this weekend to test drive a new car. You're looking to buy or lease a new car, and you get to the showroom and the super hyper aggressive alpha approaches you and they want to close you today. And you're like, back off, just come in the first time around, want to sit in the seat, check out the headroom and the leg room, see what the comfort's like. Maybe if things go really well, we might take it for a test drive, but we're weeks away, maybe months away from buying. They don't hear that last part though. They don't hear that you're months or weeks away from buying. They just hear that you are a warm body showing up to show interest, and they're convinced you're closable today, right? So I often use the analogy of, in much the same way that there's some great romantic comedy movies, and you could picture like this being like a Mila Kunis or Ashton Kutcher type of feature where they go out on a first date and they elope on the first date, right? It'd be really funny to watch the antics that someone goes through that elopes on a first date. Your clients are not going to elope with your company on the first date. It's extraordinarily unlikely that your first contact with someone that's educated and built trust in a considered purchase cycle is going to buy from you your very first interaction. So net new is just nonsense. So what's super important, though, is that we recognize that no one wants to talk to sales anymore early on. We need to work extra hard to get in there early in the awareness and consideration stages as a teacher, as a trusted advisor, as a subject matter expert, as a consultant. The way we do that is becoming really dialed into what they're trying to figure out professionally, what they're struggling with professionally, and being the one that helps not only answer their questions, but anticipate what they're going to need to know next, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of where they are based on who they are and where they are, and coach and guide them based on the muscle memory and the pattern recognition of working with other stakeholders just like them in similar companies in same or similar kinds of industries. That's the key to generating net new leads and sales opportunities, is we need to get there early, and we need to have a roadmap for staying with them throughout the buyer's journey. This might include things like highly segmented and personalized email nurturing campaigns. It should for sure include events. At the risk of getting a little meta here, like what's your live stream strategy? What's your webinar strategy? How are you getting them to spend more time with you in the context of seeing you as a trusted advisor? That is incredibly impactful for getting more of your net new leads to advance into sales opportunities. But we need to understand that buyers are now in the driver's seat. Sellers no longer are. The world has changed. This is a remote control. This is how everyone decides what they're going to spend their time on in a given day. So it's just a matter of like us figuring out, is our culture catching up to that reality and bought into that reality? Or are we still waiting for them to go dig out the phone book or get their BlackBerry or their fax modem or dial-up ready to go, like we're going to sell like it's still 20 years ago? It's crazy to think that so much of the data center industry's projected growth, no matter whether you talk to NVIDIA's Jensen Huang with his $1 trillion projection, or Michael Dell's projection of 100x growth in data center demand, it doesn't matter which of these gurus that you are building your plan around for forecasting. However, it is super important to recognize that the likelihood of you being able to sell AI-related data center products or services out of the back of a Model T Ford or horse and buggy, it's kind of ridiculous. A big part of the reason why your buyers are on the self-propelled buyer's journey is because of digital transformation. It's because of the rise of cloud and SaaS and mobile and social and streaming and personal assistants and IoT and EVs. All of this stuff is what's creating and of course AI is what's creating the massive amount of demand for digital infrastructure, for data center infrastructure. So we need to adjust to the reality that most of the buyer personas and most of the kind of accounts that we want spend their day digitally glued. They're looking at their phone dozens, if not hundreds of times a day for answers. How do we show up? Become super aware of who they are and what they care about, and bake that into our entire plan for lead generation and sales cycle acceleration in and around the data center industry. Okay, next question. How do we find prospects for sustainable digital infrastructure and carbon neutral technology? How do we find prospects for sustainable digital infrastructure and carbon neutral technology? Well, for starters, your company needs to decide if you're just pinky toeing it in the pool or you're diving full into the pool. What do I mean by that? Do you want to be known as the preeminent, as the most authoritative source of information, the Wikipedia of sustainable digital infrastructure and carbon neutral technology? Or are you just kind of like posing and faking it and hoping that, I don't know, maybe you can rent some eyeballs from a big media company or a big event or something like that down the road, and maybe you can do an aggressive PR push and get a analyst to say something nice about your company? The reality is, with so many digital buyers' journeys now being the dominant journey through which digital infrastructure and data center related services are researched and compared and actually purchased, it's incredibly important that if you want to be known for those topics, sustainability and carbon neutral technology, that you have a position, a defensible position on what sets you apart from all the other companies in the space. I've talked about for years the concept of pillars like differentiation, competitive positioning, thought leadership, sales cycle acceleration, and scalable, predictable revenue growth. The differentiation is incredibly important. And the reality is, where most people mess up the differentiation is they're very focused on themselves. They're focused on how great their team is, how great their facilities are, how many awards they've won. And those are all things that your employees and your board members will care about. Some of your family members will even care about it. But complete strangers who don't yet know that your company exists, they're not going to care about it. They care about a goal they're trying to figure out. They care about a challenge that's stressing them out, that's causing them to have to pull all-nighters and ruin their vacation, taking time away from their loved one. That's what they care about. And the better job you can do with being aware of what's going on in their lives and how you can add value to that before you dare demand any value back in return, the better job you're going to do of finding prospects for sustainable digital infrastructure and carbon neutral technologies. So once you understand who's on your target account list, if you're doing like account-based marketing, account-based selling, what your ideal client profile looks like, who your most important and second most important buyer personas are, how you're dealing with segmentation and personalization. Once you have that in mind, you need to build a go-to-market content strategy about how you're going to educate and build trust around the topics of sustainable digital infrastructure and carbon neutral technology. Maybe you do a podcast with those exact words in the title of the podcast. And every week for a half hour, an hour, you go live and you interview internal subject matter experts and external subject matter experts. And maybe some weeks you bring 2 or 3 subject matter experts together and you're like a news anchor running a panel discussion where you're comparing and contrasting viewpoints. Maybe you run a survey and you gather data among your clients and prospects and your partners about some issues that are top of mind for sustainable digital infrastructure and carbon neutral technology. And you put out the annual State of Carbon Neutral Technology Research Report, the State of Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Research Report, which can be as simple as asking 10 or 20 questions, tabulating the results, and providing some analysis and input. So those are some ways that you can get found by the right people in the right places at the right time and for the right reasons. Now, when it comes to is how tightly you're defining your addressable market, your total addressable market, or your ICP, it may argue for having a different balance between topic-based lead generation and company-based lead generation, and it'll determine how deep you go on organic blogging content, like search engine optimization and organic social, like on LinkedIn or YouTube or things like that, or going for specific companies and specific stakeholders within those companies. Again, a lot of it depends on the nature of how tight your addressable market, how tight your ideal client profile is, and what you ultimately do with your go-to market strategy. But at the end of the day, if you want to find prospects for sustainable digital infrastructure and carbon neutral technology, you need to know who those prospects are, what they care about, and how you're going to add value to their professional lives. And we're going to come back and we're going to tackle 3 more questions this week. But before we do that, here is a quick word from our sponsor.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Welcome back. Joshua Feinberg here again from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you are watching this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream. The next question that we're going to tackle this week is, how do we build sales and marketing for data center storage, protection, and management? How do we build out sales and marketing? How do we build out a go-to-market playbook, a go-to-market strategy for data storage, protection, and management? For starters, we want to go back from a customer success perspective, from a product management perspective, and make sure that we have the words correct that our most important clients, our most important stakeholders use. In other words, when they go do a search on Google or Bing, when they ask a question of Siri or Copilot or Google or Alexa, are they asking for the phrase that includes data storage? Are they asking for data protection? Are they asking for data management? Or are they using words that are a little bit different, sometimes quite a bit different? But let's say we've done our homework and we've validated that, okay, we know among our biggest success stories, among our biggest case studies that align with our ideal client profile and how we define our addressable market, we know that those words are top of mind. We know that we want to be found and we want to show up when it comes to data storage, data protection, and data management. With that in mind, we need to figure out how broad our addressable market is, or is it very narrow? Do we have a mainstream kind of plan where we're potentially selling to hundreds of thousands of different companies, or are we selling to a few thousand companies or a few hundred companies? Why is that important? Because the more narrow your ideal client profile is defined, the more narrow your addressable market is, the less tolerance you're likely going to have for the lack of precision around search-based demand versus targeting at a company level. So let's say, for example, you decide that you want to be seen as one of the top 5, top 10 most authoritative sources of content, subject matter expertise on data storage on the planet. You literally want to be like the Wikipedia of data storage when it comes to anything and everything, hundreds of different related topics in and around data storage for your particular ideal buyer. The challenge with doing that, let's say you're focused on blogging, and for every blog, you're also creating a corresponding video that would be first and foremost keyword optimized on YouTube, the second most popular search engine on in the US after Google. So let's say you're over-indexing, you're spending a lot of your efforts on search-based content for blogging and video. The challenge with that is, even if both of them are simultaneously hitting it out of the park, you have great domain authority, you're really totally figured out the YouTube algorithm, you're doing great. The challenge is a huge percentage of your readers and viewers may be in geographic areas that you don't sell to. Like maybe you only sell in the United States, maybe you only sell in the European Union, maybe you only sell in Asia. But you're getting all of these visitors and all these leads organically from all over the planet. Is that good or is that wasteful? I don't know. It depends on what your priorities are and how broad your net is. Along the same lines, if you're selling an offering that's at a price point that's most appealing to mid-market and enterprise buyers in a specific geographic market, is it a problem if a big percentage of your search-based leads coming from like blogging and YouTube are coming from like solopreneurs and tiny like 1 to 10 person companies where your price point would be like massive sticker shock? Or maybe they're coming from huge enterprise companies that might be too big for your offering. So you think about like Goldilocks, just too big but not too big, right? The balancing act there. So the more hyper precise you need to be in defining your ideal client profile, the less you may be enamored with free search engine traffic, whether it's blogging, organic search traffic, or whether the equivalent version coming from the YouTube algorithm. And the more you may want to focus on, if you're not doing search engine marketing like paid ads, you may want to focus on account-based marketing. And with account-based marketing, what I think of is in and around the data center industry, like two prongs. Prong number one is assuming that you have good lead generation and lead nurturing and sales cycle acceleration efforts, picking out specific companies and roles within those companies that are most likely for them to be super interested in the kind of content that you're publishing. So you'd use like LinkedIn ads and LinkedIn campaign management to be hyper specific about who you're going after, the specific companies, their job functions, their job titles. And if you get into some more intermediate, more advanced level stuff within LinkedIn ads, LinkedIn campaign management, you can run all kinds of tests on skills endorsements, group memberships, inferential type stuff. There's even micro conversions where you can do like a version of retargeting of that particular traffic. So that's one side of it on the paid ad side. And again, this is if you're selling to mid-market and enterprise and you have strong enough unit economics where you can for sure afford the costs of paid lead acquisition. The other side of it would be like outbound, anchored around something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, but there's plenty of other cold outreach tools that you can do along the same lines. But the basic idea is that with all of this, recognize that we're trying to intercept people by their shirt collars virtually as early as possible in their journey. I know everyone on the planet would love to get a complete stranger to book time on your salesperson's calendar, right? But if they've never heard of you before and they're really not in market and they may be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months away from prioritizing this initiative, our goal is to attract the right person in the right place at the right time. That's all subjective. We need to recognize that like your ideal buyers do not want to spend much time with your sales team anymore. They really want to go through, and Gartner and a handful of other firms have validated like 83% of the buyer's journey is now happening before you meet a prospect. In order for your sales team, in order from anyone in your company to have a presence in the first 83% of the buyer's journey when they're basically sales allergic, sales adverse, willing to walk through hot coals to avoid booking a demo on your calendar. So what are we going to do to build a productive relationship with the right people in those right places at the right time when their version of the right time and your version of the right time are completely on a collision course? So how do we do that? We do that with content. We do that with subject matter expertise. We do that with being seen more like a big four consultant and a lot less like a commission-hungry, transaction-focused sales rep. In a lot of ways, the data center sales professional of the future should look a lot more like a big four consultant, and your customer success folks, your account managers, should look a lot more like the MBA or the PhD version of the big four consultant. The interaction should be so valuable that it should feel a lot less like sales and a lot less like customer success and a lot more like free consulting. So when it comes to building sales and marketing for data storage and data protection and data management, of course, we need to be really tight about who the ideal client profile is. Of course, we need to prioritize the primary and the secondary buyer persona in those kinds of companies. So we know the stakeholders that are most important to build a relationship with. And of course, and this is stuff that's been around 10 or 15 years. That's why I keep saying, of course. But if you've never done that before, you need very well fleshed out buyer persona documents. What are the 5 or 10 biggest goals that each of those stakeholders need to figure out professionally? What are the 5 or 10 biggest challenges that are stressing them out, that are causing them to ruin time away from their friends and family, that are ruining their lives, that they desperately need a solution to? Once you have the consensus on that, it becomes a lot easier to build effective sales and marketing that puts deposits into the relationship bank account before you dare try to make a withdrawal. That's what I would be focusing on. From a tactical perspective, sure, blogs, videos, email nurturing, being present on the social channels that matter most, which in almost all cases in and around the data center industry and mid-market enterprise tech is going to be LinkedIn, with YouTube being a close second. Yeah, of course, you need to do your buyer persona research and validate this, but you need to know even more specifics, like what are the certifications this person has? What are the skills endorsements they have? What are the groups they belong to? What are the conferences that they either attend or consider attending or their peers attend? What are the trade publications that they read or their peers read? It's very, very important to be super clear on consensus on this and build your whole sales and marketing, your whole go-to-market playbook around this if you want to have a dominant position in growing market share when it comes to data centers, when it comes to data storage, data protection, and data management. And the key thing is just recognize how much the journey has changed in the last 5 or 10 years. Like that 83% number where the journey's 83% over before you meet a prospect. 10 years ago, when I started talking about this at webinars for the data center industry, that number was 56%. It was only half over. Now you really don't have a shot if you're not in the business of being a media company for your most important buyer personas, because the game is almost over. If you like baseball analogies, you're not allowed in the stadium till the bottom half of the 8th inning. If you're more of a football, soccer, or basketball fan, they're not letting you into the 4th quarter. They don't care how much money you spent on the lavish box, the suite to bring all your prospects and customers out there. They have a policy: no obnoxious salespeople in the stadium, in the arena, before the bottom half of the 8th inning, before the 4th quarter. Kind of weird, right? To think that you're writing the check and they would lock you up, but that's the prevalent attitude. That's what we're treading water against. And the sooner you wake up to that reality, the easier it is to build an effective sales and marketing game plan and strategy around data storage, data protection, data management. Next question: how do we scale up data center sales and marketing? That's a great one. We don't want to be one and done. So when I think about scaling up, I don't know how many of you have ever seen the Moneyball movie, but I think of that scene in the beginning of Moneyball where Jonah Pitt and Brad Hill are in the parking garage, and Jonah Hill goes off and he's like, people that run professional baseball teams are asking all the wrong questions. My analogy, my version of that, is people that are planning data center sales and marketing are asking all the wrong questions. Instead of renting eyeballs for a few hours or a few days at a time, a few times a year, what we need to be very realistic about is your buyers are going to research and compare options and evaluating pricing on their schedule when they feel like it, when they have time, when there's urgency, not when you artificially try to create urgency. No one wants more selfish sales and marketing. They want to solve their own professional goals. They want to address their own challenges, the things that are freaking them out, the things that are causing them to be so stressed out that they need a therapist to help them navigate their professional obligations. We can't just show up and pretend to have all of the answers that everyone says when every problem, when you're a hammer, every problem's a nail, right? So we need to be super dialed into the reality that in order to scale sales and marketing, it's a self-propelled buyer's journey. The buyer is now in the driver's seat. 83% of that buyer's journey is going to be over before you get to meet a prospect. And the only way we're going to earn our way into that first 83% is if we put away our sales shtick, we put away our obnoxious interruption marketing and begging for meetings and things like that, and we recognize that we need to meet them where they are. Where are they? They have stuff they need to figure out. If they figure it out, they can get a big promotion. Their company can grow and scale. Great mergers and acquisition. They're on the right side of everything. If they screw it up, their career could come to a grinding halt. Once we understand the consensus on that, and we understand the way that researching and comparing options and evaluating pricing is now done completely self-propelled, then we can set aside the romantic notion that event marketing and field marketing is going to solve all of our problems. Because unless you're able to repeat the 3-day event 160 times a year, 150 times a year, 120 times a year, whatever it is, you're going to come up short. Because the reality is, even if you're covering 8 or 10 or 12 major events a year for 2 or 3 days, there's still like 10 or 11 months of the year where you don't have that proximity with that prospect. And we know most of these events are pretty fragmented. It's pretty rare that you see the exact same people at all the events, except the people that do exactly what you do, right? The vendors talking to vendors. So if we're aware of that, then we need a way to get found when they go to Google and they go to Copilot and they go to LinkedIn and they go to YouTube and they're searching for answers. The search engines, the social media, the streaming video, the podcasts, the peer answers, the dark social, whatever you want to call it, they have I don't know, it's fortunately or unfortunately, but they've won the battle. The salesperson is no longer going to be the gatekeeper of information. In fact, it's far more likely that your prospects may come to your sales meetings far more educated about certain topics than your entry level and intermediate level non-veteran salespeople. That's a problem too. The last thing in the world you want is for your prospects to know your thought leadership that your company is publishing better than your internal salespeople do. So if that's an issue, that's a training issue, a certification issue, an onboarding issue. You need to fix that like yesterday, because no one's going to spend time with someone from your sales team if that person can't add value to the research and decision-making process. So that person needs to seem a lot more like an advisor and a consultant and a teacher, and far less like someone that's just trying to close a sale to make quota. And obviously, when it comes to the scaling up part, we need to do more of what's working and less of what's not. And the crazy part is, when we look at different channels that we're involved in, what works well on your blog may not work as well on search-based video content. And what works well on search-based video content on a certain topic may not work that well on email marketing, or it may work well on email marketing and it doesn't work as well on LinkedIn organic, or it works well on someone's LinkedIn profile but doesn't necessarily work well on the company page. The point being is, you and I do not know what is going to work before we actually hit the publish button and test it. Seriously, we don't. We can go based on instincts. We can go based on things that we've seen that are similar to this. But until we run that exact test, we just don't know. So the name of the game is to ship fast, test a lot of different things, and then look at what's working and what's not. Guaranteed, we could sit down right now, you and I, and brainstorm out 10 topics that are top of mind for your primary buyer persona for your company. And of those 10 topics, we'd brainstorm like 10 working titles for blog posts, 10 subject lines for emails, 10 hooks for an organic LinkedIn post, 10 working titles for a YouTube video. And you may hazard a guess and say, I've been in this a long time. I'm going to put my money on number 7. And I'm going to say, no, Jill, it's not number 7. It's number 2. And you know what? Joshua and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of blog posts. There's a really good chance we're both wrong. Number 7 and number 2 end up being bottom of the pack, and number 4 ends up winning big time on YouTube. But here's the crazy part. Number 9 ends up winning on the blog. And number 2, it ends up being the best email subject line that you've ever run a nurturing sequence through. So the point is, we can come up with 10 topics, 10 ideas, 10 concepts that we want to test. But until we test them, we just don't know. And different segments, different target audience are going to respond differently. Different channels are going to respond differently. But if we want to scale, first we need to get rid of the idea of selfish interactions and selfish content. It needs to be all about providing value. And we need to be able to provide value in a lot of different places, because there's a really good chance that your target market is a lot more segmented and a lot more fragmented than you realize. And it's only when you start to get to product market fit and go to market fit that you start to gain appreciation for what channels are working best. Most of the consulting clients that I work with now, I'm advising that sales professionals need to come back and be involved in the buyer's journey much earlier than they ever have before in their career. And this is a big problem for prima donnas that have only worked in huge companies where they have access to massive amounts of sales development, sales enablement, and marketing support. If You take someone like that and put them in a 50-person or a 10-person startup, and they have to wear lots of different hats. It's pretty jarring. But the reality is, in order for your sales professionals to get to the right people in the right places for the right reasons, those sales professionals need to be seen like experts and teachers. And the only way they're going to be able to do that successful is to get off the high horse and come back and collaborate on some of these content initiatives that 5 or 10 years ago would have been poo-pooed and said, not my job, that's marketing's job. I don't do that stuff. Well, you can't afford to have that attitude anymore. It's not going to serve you well. And along the same lines, marketing professionals, sales development professionals need to be prepared to take their initiatives much deeper into the buyer's journey than they ever have before, to be able to trace value throughout the full journey, throughout awareness and consideration and decision, throughout the having of challenge content around challenges and goals, and comparing of options, and starting to look at specific companies. So getting past those stereotypes and hangups and prima donna syndromes and not my job kind of stuff needs to go away, especially in a smaller company. In a larger company, we can have specialization of roles. Sure, it makes sense. But if you're in a company that, say, has anywhere from 10 to 50 employees or 50 to 200 employees, the collaboration, the alignment is incredibly important. It's everything. That's why I talk about the idea of the go-to-market team. The go-to-market team that has representation from sales, from marketing, from customer success, often sometimes called account management, from product management, and from channel partnerships. And most of all, your executive sponsor who can move mountains to get this prioritized, because they believe and they know in their heart of hearts that your company needs to be seen as the be-all, end-all expert, the go-to expert on anything and everything having to do with what you do within the data center industry. That's the key to scaling sales and marketing. And the final question that we are going to address for today is, how do we save time when marketing and selling data center lifecycle services? That's a great one. Time management. And that's so important because we have limited resources. The first limited resource is, if you're like most people that are watching or listening to this live stream or podcast, you probably work a fairly traditional week, like 9 to 5, 8 to 4, 8 to 6. Maybe you every once in a while check your email, check your Slack, whatever it is, a little bit in the evening during the weeks, maybe a little bit on a Sunday evening or something like that. But, you're covering your week maybe 50, 60 hours at the most, which at the upper end of the range sounds like a lot. However, remember, there's 168 hours in a week. So you may think that, your territory is all of the US or all of North America. So you think, cover the 3 time zones, 4 time zones pretty well. Yeah, I'm good. Not necessarily. You may think that because your coverage, your region is Western Europe or Central Europe or Eastern Europe or all of Europe or EMEA, you may think that, okay, cool, I'm going to cover the 3 or 4 most important time zones and I'll be good to go. What that does not account for is your prioritized buyer personas, your primary and secondary buyer personas. When they have something that they need to figure out for their job, when they have a challenge or roadblock that they're up against that's stressing them out to no end, there's a really good chance that they're not just going to be figuring that out during traditional business hours. So what does that mean? There's a really good chance they're going on Google or YouTube or Bing or Copilot or Siri or wherever their source of information is, or posting a question on LinkedIn, 2:00 in the morning, their local time. Why? Because they're freaking stressed out that their job is on the line and they're up in the middle of the night trying to research this. And if you have an amazing piece of content that they find on a search engine results page, or one of the first few videos that come up when they do a search on YouTube, guess what? You have earned an at-bat. You have earned a chance to attract and engage with that person. And if they like your piece of content enough, if you get enough value from that blog post, if they get enough value from that video, because you've pulled them in through the virtual shirt collars and they've been like, wow, I finally get it. This is super helpful. I've been searching for a couple of hours, but I've been frustrated with this for weeks or months. I can't believe I finally found the answer. What else does this company have to say? Oh, there's an ebook that goes into this in more detail. There's an on-demand webinar. There's a webinar coming up next Thursday. I got to get that. I got to see what else they have to say. So they click on the call to action. They go to a landing page, and next thing you know it, they're trading their virtual business card for access to what's on the other side of the landing page. And you have an early stage lead. And recognize that it is an early stage lead. But the cool part with that early stage lead is you are now in the driver's seat relative to all of the other direct competitors, indirect competitors, and non-business model competitors that you're going up against. You have a chance to stay with them throughout the entire buyer's journey for not just one or two touch points, but all 28 of those touch points. And the choice is ultimately going to be yours about how you're going to stay with them. Do you have more content that continues to lead them down the path that you know someone like that buyer persona is most likely to go down? Or do you just have like a pinky toes version in the swimming pool of what you think they might at a surface level want, and you're pushing it really, really hard into booking time on a salesperson's calendar? But if you want to be able to save time, recognize that the most impactful way for you to be able to save time is to understand your buyer personas better than they understand themselves, and proactively be in the media business of creating amazing content at volumes that make sense for your company to be competitive. It's probably not a few, and it's probably not even a few dozen. It probably will end up being hundreds of content assets that are relevant for your buyer personas, that are proactively delivered to them based on who you know they are and where they are in the journey. And the better job you can do with, like a chess player, of anticipating what their next move is going to be, the more likely it is that you're going to very well cover the surface area of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. So if you want to save time, show up when they want you to show up. Not when you happen to be working, but when they want to show up. And if it's 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon on a holiday weekend, and this is a big enough problem for them, chances are, if they find a great resource, they're not just reading one blog post or watching a 7-minute YouTube video. They may literally spend 1 to 3 hours devouring dozens of pages of content on your website, watching dozens of videos, watching a couple of on-demand webinars, and they get to the end of that 1, 2, 3 hours later, you see this stuff showing up in your CRM. Like if you have HubSpot, for example, it'll show you the form conversions, the pages they looked at, the number of visits. It'll show you amazing stuff. Like, this person on an initial visit looked at 30 pieces of content, and they booked time on my calendar for tomorrow, for the day after tomorrow. Holy crap, that person's going to come to this meeting knowing more than our entry-level sales development rep knows. They're bought in. You've bought them in. You've won the battle. That's how you can scale efficiently. You need to show up where they show up. You need to have content that resonates with their biggest goals and challenges. Another huge time saver that I advocate, of course, is leaning into sales productivity. Good sales tools like templates and snippets, self-booking calendars. It seems kind of basic in the time and era that we're in. People have had them for 10 years. You'd be shocked how many times I do a basic website audit for someone that's new to most of this, and they're making someone fill out a contact us form, and you're going to go back and forth several rounds and kill all the sales momentums because your competitor had a self-booking calendar. And the cool part is when someone puts an appointment on your self-booking calendar, they have a sense of closure. They close the browser, they close the window, and they move on because they're looking forward to that they have this meeting booked for you. Whereas if they fill out a contact us form, they have no idea if and when they're ever going to get a response. And I could throw out some statistics about how disappointed most people are when they fill out those forms, when they either don't get a response at all or several days later. But if you want to save time on your sales and marketing, you need to be into saving time for them by anticipating what they want, giving them a great prospect experience that blows them away, that's training them to know that you are the go-to source. Because if it's all just about your time, you've lost already. The extreme empathy of being seen as a concierge, like at a 4-star resort, who's guiding them on all of these critical decisions as they navigate all of the different options with either different co-location operators or technology companies or facilities companies or construction or real estate. The better job you can do with not only answering those questions, but anticipating what they're going to want next, the more delighted they're going to be and the more likely it is that you have won them over. So when it comes to saving time with marketing and selling data center lifecycle services, know your buyer personas, give them what they want proactively, use great sales enablement, great sales productivity tools. There's AI options that are going to run circles around this, but a lot of people haven't even implemented the basics yet, like the templates and the snippets and basic workflow automation. And of course, at the risk of getting a little bit meta, if you're tired of doing one-on-one conversations all the time, try this. Try live streams, try webinars. You'd be surprised how many middle funnel prospects will show up to a group demo that don't want one-on-one sales contact. They don't want to be put on the spot. They don't want to be qualified. They don't want to have to jump through all those hoops, but they are super curious. A good way to think about it, you have a booth at an expo on the floor of the conference, and someone wandering by happens to see that you have a wireless mic on, lavalier mic, and you're doing a group demo, and there's 5 or 10 people gathered around, and they decide to drop by. And then they Slack message their boss, who's 200 feet away in another booth. Hey, come here, you got to see this booth 37. And they wander over. And unfortunately for your salespeople at that point, that is not a gated interaction. They're able to watch over the shoulder and watch in the demo. And that's exactly the reason that you got them in the first place, is because not everyone wants to qualify and go through your ridiculous process of getting time on the salesperson's calendar. But they're super curious about what it is that you do. And there's a really good chance that if you showed them something unique about what it is that you do, and you've educated and built trust, that once they've attended that one, they're spreading it. You already saw, immediately sales acceleration by them spreading it to their boss. But it's far more likely now that the two of them have seen that you're going to build a productive relationship and be able to advance that sale. So those are some of the ways that you can save time when marketing and selling anything related to data center lifecycle services, but just data center services in general. So that's all I have for today for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream. I am Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals, GTM professionals, in the growth of the data center industry. I wish you great success in using much more effective go-to-market to be able to grow your company in a way that helps you hit your business goals and creates an amazingly delightful experience for your prospects, customers, and partners alike. And until next time, I wish you all the best in your data center related growth.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.